Hi, I'm Zanzi. You are listening to Farmers Inside Track, proudly brought to you by Food for Mzansi. My name is Patricia Tembo, and welcome to today's episode. In today's Farmer Mentor episode, we speak to none other than Dale Hutton, who is the 2025 Toyota SA Kwanalu Young Farmer of the Year. This recognition led him to being a finalist for the Agri-SA Toyota SA 2025 Young Farmer of the Year Award. So join us as Dale Hutton shares his journey into running an efficient dairy farm, how he manages the volatilities of farming, and some of his reflections on leadership and stewarding the land. Dale Hutton, welcome to Food for Mzansi's podcast, Farmers Inside Track. We're super glad to have you as our farmer mentor for this episode.
Really excited to be a part of it.
Awesome. So Dale, you are the 2025 Toyota SA Kwanalu Young Farmer of the Year, which put you as a finalist for the 2025 Toyota SA Agri-SA Young Farmer of the Year last year, which is a huge deal, honestly, and congratulations for that. But of course, that is not where your story started. Maybe if you could talk us through how your journey into agriculture actually began.
Thanks for that. It has been a journey, an exciting one, when it sort of all came to a head last year with being nominated for the competition. But yeah, where it all started, I've grew up on a farm. I've always lived where I farm, and getting into agriculture, I wasn't sort of under any sort of illusion as to it being sort of a romantic, pretty lifestyle kind of thing. I always saw my dad farming, sort of early mornings, lots of responsibility, working with animals, working with people. And that's kind of the mindset that I've always had about it. So I wasn't under any illusions. And then I wasn't always expecting to be involved in agriculture. I actually have a background in entomology and botany. I studied at Rhodes University, and I was always very excited about sort of being out there somewhere in Africa, saving the environment, looking after nature, and sort of protecting biodiversity. So I did my postgraduate studies in biodiversity conservation. I went and did my honors thesis in the Eastern Cape in a place called Hluleka. And there I was sort of living with the Xhosa community there for a couple of weeks. And we were looking at what value they derived from the forests that they lived close to. Obviously, it's very hard to put a monetary value on the cultural interactions between people and the environment. So that's when my sort of fascination with people and the environment started evolving. And that was a really fascinating process. And I got a lot of value out of that. And then I actually went to South Korea for a while. And then I worked there as an English teacher. And after a while, I realized I wanted to get back into that space of the environment and working in nature, because obviously you can imagine it's complete opposite working in a classroom in South Korea to being somewhere in the bush in Africa, interacting with people and the environment. So I came back and I got involved with the fuel pipeline that we were building from Durban to Joburg. And I was an environmental control officer on that project. I was really excited to be using what I studied and really getting stuck in, and I felt like I could make a difference there. It was Transnet building a fuel pipeline between Durban and Joburg, through rivers, through sensitive ecosystems, through a lot of farming areas. And it was my job to kind of make sure that they upheld their end of the deal in terms of protecting the natural resources along the way. And I did that for half a year. And then I rotated into a multinational environment group called ERM. And there I was working on impact assessments in places like Sierra Leone, Ethiopia, Zambia. That was really exciting because there was a lot of time out there working with specialists on iron mines, potash mines, hydroelectric power schemes, all that kind of thing. And it was really intense, lots of data capture and lots of people management. I was really in the space where what I had studied could be used to its full extent. And it was really weird. Just fell completely out of love with that whole experience. Very quickly, I just realized that it's not the life I wanted. It wasn't fulfilling me at all. And I would often sit there on a Sunday night just dreading a Monday because, it was just back to the office and then planning the next trip and then saying goodbye to my wife. And I didn't see how it was going to end 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, where would I be sort of in my career? Would I be happy? So we decided that we'd go back to South Korea for a while, and so with a saving goal to sort of come back with some money so we could start up whatever businesses or whatever we wanted to do. So we went back to South Korea for another 3 years and did a lot of traveling, and it was amazing. It was a really good time. I was newly married at that time, so it was all very exciting to be traveling with my wife and doing all of that instead of going into sort of Ethiopia for 3 weeks by myself. So that was really cool. And then towards the end of those 3 years, our family members were having kids. One or two of our grandparents had sadly passed away while we were overseas. So we realized, hang on, we should actually be back home and starting to make a life there, because we were kind of in a bit of a dream world there, earning good money, traveling the world, but back home, life was carrying on and we were missing out. So we decided that we wanted to come back. But a few of our family members had said to us, listen, South Africa isn't looking like a good place for a young couple to be right now. There's a bit of risk, especially involved with agriculture and that sort of thing. And so we weren't sure. And I feel like I've said this a million times in the other interviews regarding the Young Farm of the Year, but basically we came home and we decided to visit all of our friends from university, from school, family. We were lucky enough to do a big trip all around South Africa and as many people as we could get in touch with, mostly just to kind of get a feel for what the atmosphere was like in South Africa. And so we got in our car and started driving, and we carried on driving for 2 months, visiting friends, seeing the sights and catching up with South Africa. And very quickly, we just realized that it's better than ever. This is home. This is exactly where we want to be. We want to make a life here. Compared to all the other countries we had been to, nothing was sort of matching what South Africa was giving us in terms of making us happy and ticking all the boxes for us as a young couple. I mean, at the end of the drive, we really just sort of had this epiphany moment that we wanted to come home and we wanted to be involved with the farm and start farming. So I said that when growing up, I didn't have a romantic view of farming, but as you get older and as you start thinking about family and kids, farm life and country life is unbeaten. It's just the best place to be, even though there's stresses and hard work and risk involved. In terms of raising children and having a family, it's exactly what we wanted. So then I got stuck into farming. I work with my dad, and he was very involved as I started. And then he slowly started sort of handing over responsibility to me. These days, he's basically my counselor. I work with him. I see him every day, but I make most of the decisions. I run a lot of the tough ones past him because he's got all that experience. We've got 3 kids now, and my wife is very happy on the farm. She's actually a Joburg girl, so it's been an amazing transition for her. But I love it. And, I alluded to the fact that when I was an environmental consultant, I would have these Sunday blues about going back to the office. And I can, in all honesty, say there's never a day when I don't feel like going to work. It's dynamic. It's exciting. There's always a new challenge. The best part about it for me is that those challenges, most of them, if I roll up my sleeves and get stuck in, I can sort out 80% of my problems that are on the farm by the end of the day. There's no sort of drawn out corporate processes, no meetings that you don't need to be in. Sort of farming is very much sort of you get out what you put in. So it's a satisfying space and a really wholesome place for a family.
Wow, Dale, you have a really beautiful story. I'm just thinking you were an environmental consultant, farmer, and a travelist, honestly, because you've traveled to several countries, and I'm pretty sure that also just expanded your worldview. Goes back to your approach to farming as well. You mentioned that your background is in entomology and botany, and I think that has such an advantage with farming itself in terms of crop protection, pest control, etc. I want to maybe touch on that a little bit later in the podcast. I'd love to hear from you how that has helped you with the farming business. But maybe if we can move into understanding what your farm business is. I know you're based in Creighton, in KwaZulu-Natal. So maybe you can just walk us through the business and the cooperations.
We are a pasture-based dairy farm in Brighton. So that means that we've got dairy cows and they graze grass and they make milk. And we supply a cheese factory that's very close to me. It's a really nice dynamic for us. It's got that security. We know who our milk buyer is. We've got a good relationship with him. So yeah, we have cows and we make milk in a more sort of detailed answer would be our cows are optimized to convert grass into a high quality dairy product. So we've chosen genetics that suit the climate of Crichton. Crichton's a very hot area. So for us in particular, we've chosen to go with a smaller cow that can handle the heat a lot better, that is a lot more mobile in wet, muddy conditions. She can take grass as the primary input in her diet and convert it into something that helps her maintain fertility, hold on to her condition, but still produce a reasonable amount of milk. And, when you're making milk, it's not about, some people, it is just about liters. But for us, our focus is on high protein content and high butterfat content. And it's a big factor when people are buying your milk. They want those factors. They don't necessarily just want a whole lot of white water from you. We've taken that decision to sacrifice liters in a way, but also opt in for a cow that's lower maintenance, a more sustainable cow, in my opinion. Like, I'm surrounded by dairy farmers here. My valley, we've got the most amount of milk per hectare in the country. So it's a very intense dairy atmosphere here, and there's a lot of varying opinions. And you can go to the pub on a Wednesday and say that your cows are the best, and you'll have 3 different people arguing with you about whose cows are better. It's very much a subjective thing, and it has to suit your system, and it's always evolving. There's always new genetics. There's people coming to your office with offerings from all corners of the earth with new genetics, new solutions to whatever problems you might be facing. We've opted in for an efficient, sustainable cow, and we have a big focus on the way we grow our pastures in a way that it works in harmony with the soil, is not too intensive in terms of demanding water. It requires fertilizer, but not too much. And that's basically it. We've got a dairy that's built for efficiency and minimum risk. We've got a very basic dairy, but it can operate really well. We're milking 1,300 cows at our peak, which is not small. And that's basically the setup. We're very reliant on our staff. We are very focused on staff members that, if they're in a position, they fill that position. They're qualified. They're on board with our vision. And if we see someone that's sort of not fulfilling that role properly, we put a bit of effort into trying to get them on board and making sure that that position is filled with the right person. And we solve that by trying to upskill as much as we can. We have a big appreciation for our staff, and it's a massive part of our business, having the right team. Other than that, it's just about balancing your inputs. There's a lot of things that you can spend money on as a dairy farmer. You can chase productivity by buying expensive meals. So we have a lot of reps who come in and want to sell new products to us. But what means the most for us is the service and the support that we get from those people. It's a very big team dynamic, and our philosophy is very much steered towards suppliers that actually add value as opposed to adding interesting products.
I want to stay a little bit more on the production aspect from what you shared. And so you mentioned that you have an optimized breed. Do you mind sharing what the breed is, and maybe if you are breeding the cattle on the farm, maybe talk us through that?
So our breed of animal that we use is called the KiwiCross. It's from New Zealand in origin, and it's a cross between the Holstein and the Jersey, but it's sort of quite a mature breed. So it's eventually established its own sort of reputation as the KiwiCross. And it's a lightweight animal. It's about 495 kg at mature mass. And she's really good at converting grass into milk. We buy in straws from a company called CRV. And when I say straws, it's semen straws. And then our staff have been trained to breed our animals with those straws. So we do our own AR on the farm. And then we do have bulls as well, but that's mostly for end of season breeding.
And this KiwiCross, is it adapted to South Africa's harsh climatic condition? Is that something that has an issue?
Yeah, Crichton is a very hot area. We get up to 36 degrees on a hot day, and it can get higher. And for a cow, she shuts off pretty quickly when it's hot. If you've got a Holstein cow, she can get up to 700 kgs. So that's a lot of animal that has to walk from the pasture to the dairy, get milk, walk back to the pasture, and be comfortable enough to immediately start converting grass into milk for the next day, because we milk twice a day. If you've got a big cow and you've got lots of them, your roadways all take pressure. If it's rained for 3 days straight and you've got these really big cows walking up and down, they're in the mud, they're slipping. It takes a lot of energy for them to move. So again, that's an efficiency thing. They'll start sacrificing milk to balance out the energy that's required for them to walk to pasture. So all those little details, they work well for us, but there's other guys who have different farm sort of layouts. You know, if they've got a really flat farm with really good roadways and soils that drain really well, it doesn't stay muddy on their farms for too long. So the cows bounce back quite quickly and get back to the grass, and they don't have to walk up steep hills. But, you know, my farm is quite close to the Umzimkulu River, so I'm on a bit of a slope. So there's quite a few uphills for cows to climb, and just suits us. I mean, we might change in the future if a better solution comes up, but right now the KiwiCross suits us really well.
And you've established your own pasture. I think you've mentioned, maybe if you can give an idea of what that looks like, you know, the pasture that's available for the cattle.
So we have 280 hectares of irrigated pasture, and we plant a mixed pasture. At one stage, we're planting 12 species of seed to sort of really boost the biodiversity of the field. But we've stepped that down a bit just because we felt like it was compromising our production. So we've taken it down to a 5 species mix. So we've got ryegrass, chicory, plantain, clover, oats, and then sometimes we plant a grass called cocksfoot. And then there's naturally occurring kukuyu in those areas too. So it actually comes closer to a 7 seed mix or 7 plant mix. And they all have their different roles. Ryegrass is really good at making milk. Chicory has an incredible taproot that penetrates deep into the soil and can pull moisture and nutrients from way deeper than any other plant. Clover is a great leg. It fixes nitrogen and helps with soils and provides a good protein source for your cows. Oats is quick out the blocks once you've planted it. It's readily available for cows to eat early on in the season. Cocksfoot's a great drought-resistant plant, and it's just really hardy grass and palatable for cows. And kukuyu is great this time of the year. Once the heat has really got up, kukuyu does really well. So when your other grasses are sort of starting to fall back and take the heat, kukuyu kind of stands up and fills that gap. So it's a balance. It's a pasture that kind of ticks all the boxes all year round.
And I suppose this is where your entomology and botany background really plays a role with the pasture and managing the pasture, as well as, of course, there are vectors in the field or on the pasture when, you know, the cattle are walking through. I'm assuming maybe you could just speak a little bit more about that and how you're able to also sort of, I suppose, pest control, because you understand, or you have like the scientific understanding of entomology and botany.
Yeah, I mean, this whole process of being nominated for Young Farmer of the Year and winning it for KZN. And I've had a lot of questions like this where they're like, okay, how does your degree tie into your farming? And it's been a really big challenge for me because obviously I stepped into the farm and I had all these youthful, enthusiastic ideas about how I was going to have this perfect, harmonious system that balanced nature but still made milk and kept the bees happy. And that's a goal and a dream. And I really still want that. But as time ticks by on a farm and you start budgeting and you start looking at cash flows and the pressures, your sort of aspirations and dreams almost take a backseat, and you just sort of go into this functional gear where you just got to do enough to keep the environment happy, but you also have to still pay your staff and buy new tractors and all that. So it's been a big challenge for me because I've had to answer this question so many times, and it's really made me go back and think, when I started, I was so enthusiastic about the environment. And as time's gone by, I've almost become jaded or almost suppressed those desires to be an environmental farmer. So it's been great for me. It's kind of revitalized my enthusiasm to do that again. But you have to really be careful, because if you want the best maize crop, because we plant maize as well for winter food, you want the best maize crop, you buy a seed that's been genetically engineered to stop insects eating it. Yeah. And it's been genetically engineered so that you can pour chemicals on it and all the other plants around it die and just your maize plant survives. And, you know, ethically, it's a very tough one because you want to grow a healthy food to feed your cows, to make a healthy milk that people can consume. But at the same time, dairy farming and most other farming operations, there's so many intricacies and details and things to worry about on a daily basis. If you can just buy that plant that almost takes care of itself and you don't have to worry about it again, it's so appealing and so tempting. And in a lot of cases, it happens, you know, and people do it. And I mean, I have maize plants that don't need to be sprayed for insects because insects won't eat them. And it does beg the question, why won't the insect eat it, but a cow will? And all those kinds of things play into it. So it is something that I continually wrestle with, and maybe I'm overthinking it too much. It's something that I'm aware of. Managing pastures from an entomological perspective is a little bit easier because, if you plant diversity in terms of plants, it supports a diverse amount of insects and parasites as well as predators on the insect level can exist in that space because there's a diverse habitat for them to be there. So, for example, if you plant mustard, there's a particular fumigant in the mustard leaves that then kills nematodes naturally, and those nematodes can be responsible for foot rot in cattle. So you can balance it that way, but at the same time, you can have chicory plants or taller plants that can support wasps. And wasps are very good at parasitizing caterpillar, and caterpillar would traditionally eat your grass if they get to an excessive volume. But, if you can get that balance right, which is an art form in itself, and I'm not close to balancing that, but that's the theory behind it, is to have that sort of biodiversity in your plant matter that can then support a biodiversity in your insect space, and then they can almost reach a balance naturally. That's the goal, but I'm still working on that.
I think you're so media trained now that you mentioned, like, oh, I've heard this question before. I've answered it so many times. I imagine it's quite sobering. Then obviously you have the ideal to create this environmental utopia, but you have to be profitable. So I definitely hear you on that. Maybe talking a little bit more about the dairy now. I'm trying to dig back into my undergrad knowledge of like the dairy system. I think there's the fish, the herringbones. You're using the herringbone.
When I got to the farm, we had one 36-point swing over or herringbone system. And we decided that we were going to expand and grow. So we've put in a second pit or herringbone system adjacent to that. So we've got two 36s. And 36 means that you can have 72 cows in one part of your dairy at any time. And that 36 swings over, milks those 36 cows on the left side, and then swings over and milks them on the right side. So we've got double that. So at any one point, there's 144 cows in my shed that are either being milked or waiting to be milked. So that really speeds up the process. And we've got individual feeding for them. So each cow gets a custom volume of meal based on several different factors. So how many days has she been milking for? What's her live weight? And what's her body condition score? So if you look at her, you say, is she skinny? Is she medium? Or is she fat? And then you obviously don't want to overfeed cows because it's not profitable, but you don't want to underfeed cows because that's also going to affect their fertility and milk production. So there's a balance there. So whenever a cow gets milked, she walks through the dairy, gets scanned through a magnetic ear tag, gets identified. She might go into position 15, and then she gets fed while she's being milked. So it's a comfort thing as well. She gets fed like a specific amount of food set for her status. And then as she leaves, she gets scanned a second time and walks over a scale. And that scale sends data to my office that says that girl is currently 512 kgs. And last week she was 512 kgs. So in theory, her condition's holding. And that happens twice a day, every day for all the cows that are being milked. So that's like how we tailor and use technology in that sort of space to get the most out of our cows. It's not a perfect art or a perfect science yet. And there's still some quirks to it. But when you're dealing with 1,300, 1,280 animals, all those little things can help. Some people don't do it at all. We think it's working for us. We're still looking at it and deciding, but you can see it. Your cows at the end of their lactation, they've got what we call happy lines, which is an extra fat layer on either side of the cow. It looks like striations running horizontally down their stomach. And if a cow's got that, it means that she's got good condition. She's got enough excess or enough balance to be actually storing extra energy under her skin. So we call them happy lines. The dairy, one of the challenges, and I know that's probably a question that's coming up, was load shedding. So on our dairy shed, we've put in solar and we've got batteries. So we've got enough battery capacity to milk our cows twice a day. If there's load shedding or if there's been a storm and there's no Eskom or anything like that, we can still get through milking with our batteries. And there's lots of panels on the shed that then charge those batteries. And if that falls away and the batteries run flat, we still have a backup generator that can get us through the rest of it. Again, not perfect. There's still some quirks to that system, but I think the idea is great. And I've always liked that because we, as dairy farmers, we are basically solar farmers from day one. Without a sun, you're not going to have ryegrass and you're not going to have cows' food. But then if you can have solar panels in your dairy too, you kind of use the sun twice to make grass and then to make the energy to extract that milk. So that's my dairy shed, basically.
Your dairy system sounds very optimized and efficient. So earlier in this conversation, you mentioned that you've sort of taken over the farm from your father. Maybe if you can expand a bit on what that looked like, what were you working with when you started or when you took over the farm, and how that has changed to what the farm is today?
When I was in Korea, my dad basically phoned me and said, listen, I'm getting a bit older. I'm getting a bit past my prime in terms of dairy and farming. And I might be considering selling the farm or leasing it to a neighbor or something like that. And sort of a little alarm bell went off in the back of my head. And I said, this feels like an opportunity that's going to slip past me unless I do something. So I came home and, we ended our road trip and sat down with my parents and said, he wanted a farm. And yeah, immediately I got involved, and it was starting with the basics, feeding cattle myself, spending time on the tractors, working sort of with the staff when we were repairing things or building things or, doing all the developmental stuff like setting up fencing, opening up new lands. We were probably milking about 850 cows at that stage. And then because I came back, my dad kind of got sort of reinvigorated with all the things that he didn't think he would have enough time to do and the energy. So we kind of sat together and said, okay, right, we need to expand our dairy. We need to put in a bit more maize. We need to push our cow numbers to make things more profitable and all those different things. So there's just been quite a lot of growth, and it's been a big growing period in our business. We're kind of getting to equilibrium now, and I'm doing a lot less of sort of the hands-on physical work, but it's more about focusing on the efficiencies of my team and making sure that we are getting the right amount of work done every day, while ensuring quality and efficiency at the same time. So it's kind of overseeing more than anything else, but I must be honest, I do enjoy getting into my tractor and sort of planting pastures until 9 at night and then waking up early in the morning. So pasture planting season's my happy time because I can just get in my tractor, put my headphones in and plant until the sun goes down or the sun comes up. And as of now, I'll be listening to the Food from Zanzi podcast in my headphones. So that's what it looks like now.
Love that. So you're going to get to listen to your own episode very soon.
No. I think there's a rule against listening to your own episodes, surely.
You sound like you're very hands-on with the farm, which of course most farmers can relate to that who are listening. But of course, farming comes with challenges. It's just a part of it. You've mentioned electricity being an issue with the dairy. Maybe you can talk us through some of the challenges, or if there have been more challenges that you've had to navigate and how you've navigated them.
The biggest challenge in agriculture is volatility, hands down. Thinking about it yesterday and how you can wake up in the morning and be so full of joy, and by the end of the day you can be like deeply depressed because of how quickly things change. You can feel good about everything. You had a good day's work yesterday, everything got done properly, you fixed something and saved yourself some money there, you planted something, and then that evening there'll be the biggest storm and it'll hail for 15 minutes and destroy your entire maize crop and winter food. Or you can get some news about the milk price dropping or the meal price going up, or probably heard of the foot and mouth pandemic that we are all facing right now. And I mean, that is just a constant gray cloud over every stock farmer's mind right now. It's just this impending doom. You feel like nothing good is going to happen or nothing good can come out of it, or there's no sort of light at the end of the tunnel. So the challenges are of volatility. When I came back to the farm, I hadn't really thought too much about load shedding. But for 3 years, it ruled my life. And it meant setting an alarm for 1:30 in the morning because I knew Eskom would come back, and I would get out of bed, get on my motorbike in the dark with my headlamp and go and start all my irrigation systems because I knew that I only had 4 hours of electricity to irrigate my pastures. And if I didn't get out of bed at 1:30 in the morning, no one else would. So that just dominates you. But now all of a sudden it's gone. And I'm not even thinking about that. Right now I'm thinking about how 4 weeks ago I had the biggest hailstorm I've ever experienced, and all my maize is under pressure now, and I don't have the maize crop that I thought I would have for winter. But then suddenly the sun will come out, it'll rain, we'll have a few good days, and that maize will improve, and then you're on to the next thing. How am I going to vaccinate my cows against foot and mouth? How am I going to deal with that? And like I said, this job is definitely not boring. When it's boring, you're not paying attention to something. It's just this continual on your feet. There's no break. You don't get to lock the office and have a Christmas weekend off, really, because even when you are at the beach for the weekend, you know that your cows are all walking to the dairy and all walking back, and they're still busy. Girls don't go on holiday either. They still have to make milk. It's that volatility. It's a very vague answer, but there's a whole lot of little subcategories to that volatility that can wear you down over time. But it builds character and gives you broad shoulders,
As you said, Dale, it sounds like it does build character. You have to find ways to navigate these challenges. So you have obviously received recognition nationally as an established farmer, especially in the region that you're in. And of course, there are principles that have guided you so far. We have a lot of farmers, starting out to listen to the podcast. So maybe this is a point where I'd ask you to share like your nuggets of wisdom. What principles have led you to the point where you are now that you think would be very important for another farmer to hear?
Immediately what comes to mind is all the quotes that my dad says to me when something's gone wrong or there's been a mistake that was avoidable or something like that. But there's lots of things that I think back to when I'm making decisions. And I guess in our system, it's become a bit of, and it's not an uncommon expression, but prevention is better than cure. Making sure that you've checked everything a couple of times and you've made sure that if there's something that's preventable, you've been able to see it and prevent it. That can save you a huge amount of money. And whether you like it or not, you should look at every corner of your farm every single day. There's parts of your farm you don't like going to, but you should go there and look and see what's happening. Your eyes are your best tool. Without sounding cheesy, you can't manage what you don't measure. So if there's an opportunity in your business, or there's definitely tons of opportunity in my business to collect data and make the most of that data. And if you're measuring stuff, you can actually make decisions. But if you're not measuring something, even if you're a small beef farmer with 15 cows, if you're not putting the weigh band around them once a month and monitoring their development and making sure that you're getting the most for the time that's being spent to grow those animals, if you're buying feed and it's not converting into live mass, all those sort of things, if you're not measuring, you're not going to make progress. You have to put in structures in place that can allow you to collect data in whatever space you're farming in. And then I guess a classic one for me is pay attention to the tension. If you wake up in the morning and you've got this uneasy feeling inside because there's something going on, but you can't quite put your finger on it, take a moment and be like, okay, what is getting under my skin right now? What is making me grumpy? What is putting me in a mood that I'm not pleasant to be around? Okay, no, it's the fact that the hail crushed my mealies 2 days ago. Okay, is there anything you can do about that? No, there's nothing you can do about that. So put a smile on your face, go and be pleasant to your team, be pleasant to your wife, and just actually pay attention to what you can do something about. Don't dwell on the stuff that can't be helped. Obviously, don't bury your head in the sand, but you've got to keep moving forward. You've got to be resilient and be pleasant to be around. And that goes into my next point, that your team. I'm very fortunate to have my sister. She works with me as well, and she's a qualified vet nurse. So she handles a lot to do with animal health and the calves and monitoring the heifer developments at the breeding program and that sort of thing. And she's absolutely essential to our operation. I've got really great junior and senior managers in positions as well that I rely on heavily, and I trust them, and they get given more and more responsibility as I build capacity to let go of certain things, right down to the guys who fix the fences. If you motivate those guys and make them feel like their job is valued, you can get the most out of them and they can perform really well. And often if we hit a big milestone in milk production, every morning I meet with most of my outside staff and we have a briefing about what needs to happen for the day. And if we've hit a big milestone with milk production or something like that, I'll say, guys, we do a morning prayer. They really enjoy that. I really enjoy that. It sort of binds us together a little bit. We have a morning prayer and we are grateful for the milestone that we've hit. And then after prayer, I'll say, guys, every single person around you has contributed to us making the most amount of milk we've ever made today or yesterday, because the fences were working, the fertilizer was put down, the irrigation was changed at the right time. So we kind of just keep re-emphasizing the fact that it's a team, it's a family, everyone has their part to play. That's the biggest part of it. If you want to have progress, your team, whether it's 3 people or 30 people, keep them involved, keep them motivated, and make them feel like they are part of the improvement. Don't want one person to feel like whether I'm here or not, it won't make a difference. Everyone's got their part to play.
At some point there, you were like giving a therapy session. I imagine that farming, of course, a lot of farmers, would agree or relate to it being very mentally strenuous. The advice that you gave a little bit earlier, there's something really important in just navigating the stresses and the challenges and, how to overcome that or the emotions that come with it. Going back to your father, he handed over the farm. You're still working with him closely. But of course now I suppose it's in your hands now to leave a legacy. What does that look like for you?
maybe I've perceived the culture in farming and in dairy farming that growth and building and acquiring more and developing more is the be all and end all of it. And I don't disagree with that. But for where I'm at right now, I want to honor the opportunity that I have. There's land available for me to use. And for me to be wasteful or disrespectful of that space wouldn't be right. And I wouldn't be proud of that at the end of it. So I'm very focused on trying to optimize every square inch of this farm, whether it's leaving it and letting it be natural and that's what its allocation is, or if there's a piece of land that needs to be drained properly so we can get more productivity out of it, spending the time and doing that properly. But ultimately, it's without sounding cheesy, it's being a steward of the earth for the allocated space that I have. It would be wonderful to be in a position to just acquire more land and grow my empire and be an absolute nonzan. But right now, that's not where I'm at. I can only, with a clear conscience, move forward once I've done a good job with what I've got. I think I'm fifth and my sons are sixth generation on this farm. And back to the therapy session. Whenever there's something stressful or something tough, and anyone can do this, if you're on a farm and you've bought it from family or you've inherited, you can sit back and think about your problems and then ask yourself, when your great-great-great-grandfather was farming here, he also experienced problems. And if he's looking at you and you're in a depression because you've got poor 3G or 5G internet connectivity on your farm, just remember that they went through a hell of a lot more when they were trying to farm that piece of land. And that often resonates in my head. I mean, there was a lot of challenges back in the day for farmers. They didn't have tractors. They had to plow their field with oxen. They couldn't just go down to the co-op and buy another 50 bags of fertilizer. They had to wait for it to come over on a ship, all those different things. So that helps me put into context and also makes me think about my vision forward is in my actions, paying respect to what the people previous to me did to get this farm to where it's at right now.
Love that. And as our farmer mentor, to close off the episode, what advice would you give to a new entrant dairy producer? I know in South Africa, dairy is somewhat of a difficult enterprise to venture into. So what advice do you have, especially for growing the business? What advice would you have?
Lie down and wait for the feeling to go away. No, I'm joking. So I can't wrap my head around what it would be like for someone to decide one day, okay, I'm getting into farming, but they don't have a network or support group or some kind of in. But if you're starting and you have the ability to make a start and the resources are available, you should definitely align yourself with a study group of some kind. I'm a member of the Intellect study group here at KZN, and it's a massive network of dairy farmers with several consultants who sort of oversee all of us, and they provide continuous support from a technical standpoint and often emotional standpoint because they end up being our counselors as well. But that's been massive for me in terms of, okay, just stepped off the airplane from South Korea. I don't know enough about farming to really feel confident. So I signed up with Intellect. They've got technical conferences. They've got brilliant farmers days where they invite people onto other people's farms and you can walk around and the farmer gets interviewed and shows you all the things where he's sort of optimized, where he's innovated. You can ask questions. It's a really great position to learn. I mean, it's knowledge, and at the same time, you meet like-minded individuals who are possibly in the same space as you. Often you'll go to a farmer's day and he is just the ultimate farmer, like everything is perfect. And you'll be standing around with a group of other farmers and then you'll hear someone say, I'm 15 years away from being like this guy. And you're like, oh my goodness, I can relate to that because I'm also in that place. For someone who's interested in agriculture and wants to have a go at it, experience and learning and understanding is a key part of it. And even going overseas for a brief time and working on overseas farms and coming back and being more employable. Because these days, the mindset of farm ownership and farming operations has changed so drastically. If you're a talented, passionate young person who wants to be involved, you can easily connect with the right group, go over to New Zealand and get some dairy experience, or Ireland or even America. You can go and work there. They'll appreciate you there because they're always looking for helping hands on their farms. You can get some really great experience. You can improve your work ethic because the guys work extremely hard over there. And then you can come back and you can say, listen, I've got 3 years of experience on a dairy farm in New Zealand. I would love to be a part of your operation. And then you start at the bottom and you work really hard and show them that you've got a great work ethic, that you're passionate, that you are wanting to learn, and that you're a dynamic person. And you can slowly work your way up to a position where the farmer comes to you and says, listen, I'm actually interested in share milking with you. So I'm going to give you a percentage of my cows for the amount of time that you've been here, and I'll lease those cows from you. And you can slowly start building up an asset base that way. And I mean, in many ways, that's almost more appealing than owning a farm and having all the risk on your shoulders. There's lots of different ways, and the mindset's shifting slowly. We need to find ways. I mean, that's one of my biggest challenges. You have a really, really skilled person on your farm, but they are looking to build an asset and actually get value. And you need to think of things you can offer them that will keep them there. And being in a sort of a partnership with them and going forward that way is one of the mechanisms that a lot of people employ. I think knowledge and experience. And that is much more easier attainable these days than what it was when I stepped out of university, tried to get my first job, and they said, you need 6 years experience before we'll employ you. There's lots of places to get that experience and that knowledge.
Thank you so much, Dale, for joining us on this episode and for being the farmer mentor. I'm sharing your insights, your experiences, and just your advice. I'm pretty sure the farmers who are listening have gathered quite a lot from you, especially, being a farmer who's well recognized in the industry now. I don't know if you have any closing or final remarks you'd like to make before we end off the podcast.
Being named Young Farmer of KZN, it is extremely humbling, because I know for a fact that anyone who has made the decision to take risks, to expose themselves to anxiety and stress and the volatility, whoever's made that decision to step into agriculture in any of the different aspects or facets of agriculture, they deserve a reward. They deserve recognition. It's a massively stressful, massively demanding space to be in. And I've got endless respect for anyone who's involved in agriculture, because it's not easy. The hard work gets rewarded, and that's one of the perks of the job. Best of luck to whoever's listening to this.
Thank you so much to Dale Hutton, and you can definitely visit www.foodforumzansi.co.za to read more about Dale Hutton's story or some of our other farmer mentor stories. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. And that's it from me, Patricia Tembo, our technical producer, Megan van der Vent, and the rest of #Team Food Forum Zanzi. Thank you for listening and keep growing with us.